She thought the worst had passed when the Comanche raiders rode away, but what happened next would test her courage more than any battle. What could drive someone to risk everything for the enemy? And why did she go back? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked this story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plains of West Texas as Sarah Miller hurried to finish her chores. At 22, she had become the backbone of the Miller homestead since her father's death last winter. Her mother Ellen was hanging laundry while her younger brother Timothy, just 16, was repairing a fence in the distance. "Sarah, don't forget to check the western field today," Ellen called, her voice carrying on the spring breeze. "Your father always said the wheat there needed extra attention." Sarah nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. The year was 1872, and life on the frontier demanded constant vigilance and hard work. The Miller family had settled here 5 years ago, building a modest homestead that was finally beginning to thrive. "I'll head there after I feed the chickens," Sarah replied, her blue eyes scanning the horizon out of habit. The Comanche raids had become less frequent in recent months, but the memory of their last attack still haunted her dreams. As she worked, Sarah's thoughts drifted to the neighboring Thompson family, whose son James had been showing particular interest in her lately. At the last community gathering, he'd asked to call on her, and she'd agreed, though with reservation. Marriage would mean security, but Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to give up her independence. The distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted her thoughts. Timothy came running from the field, his young face etched with worry. "Riders coming." 5, maybe 6, he shouted, pointing toward the eastern ridge. Sarah's heart raced as she squinted against the sun. The approaching riders weren't settlers. Their silhouettes and riding style were unmistakable. "Comanche warriors, mother, get inside," Sarah yelled, racing toward the house. "Timothy, the rifles." Ellen dropped her laundry and ran, while Timothy sprinted toward the barn where their weapons were stored. Sarah reached the porch just as the first arrow whistled past her head, embedding itself in the wooden doorframe. Inside, Sarah's hands trembled as she loaded her father's old Sharps rifle. Timothy burst through the back door moments later, carrying 2 more guns and a box of ammunition. "They're surrounding us," he panted, his young face pale with fear but his jaw set with determination. Ellen, her face a mask of practiced calm, positioned herself at a window. "We've held them off before," she said firmly. "We'll do it again." The warriors circled the homestead, whooping and firing arrows at the house. Sarah took careful aim through a window and fired, watching one of the raiders fall from his horse. The others scattered, retreating beyond rifle range. "They'll be back," Timothy said, reloading his weapon. "They're just regrouping," Sarah nodded grimly. This wasn't their first raid, but something felt different. The warriors seemed more organized, more purposeful in their approach. As the family prepared for the next assault, Sarah caught sight of a lone figure watching from the distant ridge, a warrior separate from the main group, observing the homestead with an intensity she could feel even at this distance. "Who is that?" she whispered to herself, raising her rifle to get a better look through the crude sight. Before she could make out his features, the main group of warriors charged again, this time from multiple directions. The air filled with war cries and the sound of pounding hooves. "Here they come," Ellen shouted, firing at the closest attacker. The next few minutes passed in a blur of smoke and noise as the Miller family defended their home with desperate precision. Sarah lost track of how many shots she fired, how many warriors fell or retreated. When the attack finally subsided, an eerie silence fell over the homestead. "Are they gone?" Timothy asked, his voice cracking with tension. Sarah peered cautiously through the window. The warriors had withdrawn again, but the lone figure on the ridge remained, watching. As she studied him, she realized he was different from the others. His posture, his clothing, something she couldn't quite name. "I don't think this is over," she said quietly. "Not yet." As the sun began to set, casting the plains in golden light, Sarah knew that this night would change everything. What she didn't know was that the watching warrior would soon become entangled in her fate in ways she could never imagine. Night fell across the Miller homestead, bringing with it an uneasy calm. Sarah sat by the window, rifle across her lap, watching for any movement in the moonlit landscape. Timothy had finally fallen asleep on the floor nearby, while Ellen mended. Tears in their clothing by candlelight, keeping her hands busy to manage her fear. "You should rest, Sarah," Ellen said softly. "I can take the watch." Sarah shook her head. "I couldn't sleep anyway." Her thoughts kept returning to the warrior on the ridge, the one who had watched but not attacked. There had been something in his stance, a dignity that seemed at odds with the chaos of the raid. A faint sound outside made her stiffen. "Did you hear that?" Ellen set down her sewing. "What is it?" "I'm not sure." Sarah rose carefully, moving to a different window for a better view. In the silvery moonlight, she could make out a lone figure approaching the house, not charging, but walking slowly, deliberately. "Timothy," she whispered urgently, nudging her brother awake. "Someone's coming." The boy was instantly alert, reaching for his rifle. "Comanche? I think so. Just one." The family positioned themselves at different windows, weapons ready. The approaching figure stopped about 50 yards from the house and raised his hands in what appeared to be a gesture of peace. "What does he want?" Ellen whispered. Sarah studied the warrior. I think he's trying to communicate." Making a decision that surprised even herself, Sarah moved toward the door. "Sarah, no," Ellen hissed. "If he wanted to kill us, he wouldn't come alone," Sarah reasoned. "I'm going to see what he wants." With trembling hands, she opened the door, just enough to step onto the porch, keeping her rifle visible. The warrior remained still, hands raised. In the moonlight, Sarah could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his mid-20s. Unlike the others, he wore a mixture of traditional Comanche clothing and items clearly taken from settlers, including a cavalry officer's jacket. "What do you want?" Sarah called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The warrior lowered one hand slowly and pointed to himself. "Running Fox," he said in accented but understandable English. "Come to warn." Sarah's grip tightened on her rifle. "Warn us of what?" "Others come. Many warriors, sunrise." He gestured to the east. "You go now. No time when sun rises." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "Why are you telling us this? Why help us?" Running Fox's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "Not all Comanche. Some want peace." He paused. "I live with white men 2 winters. Learn ways. And the others? The ones who attacked us today. Led by Black Horse, hate all white settlers." Running Fox took a step closer, causing Sarah to raise her rifle slightly. He stopped. "You fought well. Brave woman. But too many come tomorrow. You die if stay." From inside the house, Timothy called out, "Sarah, get back in here." Running Fox's eyes darted to the door. "Listen to words. Take family, go now." Before Sarah could respond, a distant sound caught their attention, drumming from somewhere beyond the ridge. Running Fox tensed. "I must go. They look for me." He backed away, then added, "North path clear, 20 miles to Fort Richardson." With that, he turned and disappeared into the darkness as silently as he had come. Sarah hurried back inside, mind racing. "He says more warriors are coming at dawn, many more." Ellen's face paled in the candlelight. "Could be a trap." "I don't think." So Sarah said slowly, "He seemed genuine." Timothy peered out the window. "Even if he's telling the truth, we can't just abandon the homestead." Everything we have is here. Everything except our lives, Ellen said sharply. Your father would want us safe above all else. Sarah paced the small room, weighing their options. The nearest settlement was indeed Fort Richardson, a day's journey by wagon. They could make it by morning if they left now, but leaving meant potentially losing everything they built. We need to decide quickly, she said finally. If we're going, we should take only what we can carry and use the cover of darkness. After a tense discussion, they agreed to go, packing only essentials, food, water, ammunition, and a few precious mementos. Within the hour, they had hitched their 2 horses to the wagon and loaded their belongings. As they prepared to leave, Sarah took one last look at the homestead, the house her father had built with his own hands, the fields they had cultivated. From wild prairie, a lump formed in her throat. We'll come back, she whispered, more to herself than to her family. This isn't goodbye. They set off under the star-filled sky, following the North Trail toward Fort Richardson. Sarah drove the wagon while Timothy rode alongside on their remaining horse. Scouting ahead, Ellen reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. You made the right choice, Sarah. I know how hard it was. Sarah nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. With the mysterious Comanche warrior who had risked his own safety to warn them. Running Fox, a man caught between 2 worlds, just as she now felt caught between her past and an uncertain future. As the wagon rumbled through the night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. Dawn broke as the Miller family's wagon crested a small rise. Sarah pulled the horses to a halt, allowing them a moment's rest while she surveyed the landscape ahead. They had traveled through the night, making good progress toward Fort Richardson. But the journey had taken its toll. Timothy slouched in his saddle, fighting exhaustion, while Ellen dozed fitfully on the wagon bench beside Sarah. How much further? Timothy asked, his young voice hoarse with fatigue. If that Comanche was right about the distance, we should reach the fort by midday, Sarah replied, shading her eyes against the rising sun. The mention of Running Fox brought his face to Sarah's mind again, the unexpected dignity in his features, the risk he had taken to warn them. She wondered if he had faced consequences for his actions. A distant plume of smoke on the horizon broke her reverie. Sarah's heart sank as she realized the direction. Mother, Timothy, look, she pointed southward, toward their homestead. Even from this distance, the dark smoke was unmistakable. Ellen woke fully, her face hardening as she saw the smoke. They came back, just as he said they would. Timothy's hands tightened on his reins. Everything we built... gone. Not everything, Sarah said firmly. We're alive. We can rebuild. They continued onward, each lost in their own thoughts. The morning grew warmer as the sun climbed higher, and Sarah was calculating how much water remained when Timothy suddenly raised his hand in warning. Riders coming, he said, pointing to a dust cloud in the distance, from the east. Sarah quickly guided the wagon off the trail, seeking the cover of a small copse of trees. Could be Comanche, she whispered, reaching for her rifle. They waited. Intense silence as the riders approached. Through the branches, Sarah counted 6 men on horseback, but as they drew nearer, she realized they weren't Comanche but U.S. cavalry soldiers, their blue uniforms distinct against the landscape. It's the army, she said with relief, emerging from their hiding place and waving to attract attention. The patrol changed course, approaching the wagon cautiously until they recognized the settlers. The leader, a weathered lieutenant with a thick mustache, tipped his hat to the women. Lieutenant James Harker, Fort Richardson Patrol, he introduced himself. You folks shouldn't be out here alone. We've had reports of increased Comanche activity. We know, Sarah replied grimly. They attacked our homestead yesterday. We escaped during the night on the warning of... She hesitated, unsure how to explain Running Fox's intervention. On a warning? The lieutenant prompted. A feeling. Ellen interjected smoothly. A mother's intuition that trouble was coming. Lieutenant Harker nodded, accepting the explanation. Your intuition saved your lives, ma'am. We found 3 homesteads burned to the ground this morning. No survivors. The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. Other families, neighbors perhaps, who hadn't been fortunate enough to receive a warning. We're headed to Fort Richardson, Timothy explained. Is the trail ahead safe? Safe enough with us accompanying you, Harker replied. We're returning to the fort ourselves. You can travel with us. With the cavalry escort, they made better time. By early afternoon, the wooden palisades of Fort Richardson came into view, a welcome sight after their harrowing journey. The fort bustled with activity, soldiers drilling in the yard, supply wagons being unloaded, and civilians seeking refuge within its walls. Lieutenant Harker directed them to the commander's office, where they recounted their experience to Colonel Mackenzie, a stern man with intelligent eyes who listened carefully to their story. You're not the first to seek shelter here this week, he told them. The raids have intensified since Black Horse took leadership of the southern Comanche bands. Sarah's attention sharpened at the name. Black Horse? A Comanche warrior mentioned. That name to us. The colonel's eyebrows rose. You spoke with one of them? Sarah hesitated, then decided the truth was necessary. He came to warn us of the attack. Said his name was Running Fox. Colonel Mackenzie leaned forward, suddenly intensely interested. Running Fox? You're certain? Sarah nodded. He spoke English. Said he had lived with white settlers for 2 winters. Well, I'll be damned, Mackenzie muttered. That would be the Comanche who lived with the missionary family near the Brazos. We thought he'd returned fully to his people. He seemed caught between worlds, Sarah offered. That he is, the colonel agreed. And his warning to you is significant. It suggests division among the Comanche themselves about these raids. After their interview, the Millers were assigned quarters in the civilian section of the fort, a small but clean room with 3 cots. As they settled in, a young corporal brought them a message. Colonel Mackenzie wished to speak with Sarah alone. What does he want? Ellen asked warily. I don't know, Sarah replied, equally puzzled. But I intend to find out. She followed the corporal back to the colonel's office, where she found Mackenzie poring over maps with Lieutenant Harker and another officer. Miss Miller, the colonel greeted her. Thank you for coming. I have a proposition that may interest you. Sir, your encounter with Running Fox presents an opportunity, he explained. We've been attempting to open communication with moderate Comanche leaders, those who might be willing to discuss peace terms. Running Fox could be a valuable intermediary. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. What does this have to do with me? He chose to warn you specifically, Mackenzie said. That suggests he saw something in you worthy of respect. We're sending out a small party tomorrow to attempt contact with his band. Having you along might increase our chances of peaceful dialogue. Sarah's mind reeled at the suggestion. You want me to go with soldiers to find Comanche warriors? The same ones who just burned our home. Not the same ones, Lieutenant Harker clarified. If our intelligence is correct, Running Fox belongs to a separate band, one that disagrees with Black Horse's aggressive tactics. This could help prevent further bloodshed, the colonel added, including attacks on other homesteaders like your family. Sarah thought of the smoke rising from destroyed homesteads, of families who hadn't received warnings. Then she thought of Running Fox, risking his position to help strangers. I need to discuss this with my family, she said finally as she walked back to their quarters. Sarah felt the weight of the decision before her. To venture out again, deliberately seeking contact with the Comanche, seemed madness. Yet something about Running Fox's actions had awakened a sense of purpose in her, a feeling that perhaps understanding could exist even across the chasm that separated their worlds. The early morning mist hung low over the plains as Sarah mounted the horse provided by Fort Richardson. Around her, 6 soldiers prepared for the journey, checking weapons and supplies with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Harker would lead the expedition, while Colonel Mackenzie remained at the fort, coordinating the broader military response to the raids. Ellen and Timothy had objected strenuously to Sarah's decision to join the party. The argument had lasted deep into the night, with Ellen invoking their father's memory and Timothy threatening to follow regardless of permission. "You both know I have to do this," Sarah had finally said. "If there's any chance of preventing more attacks, more deaths on both sides, I need to try." Now, as dawn broke over the fort's eastern wall, Ellen and Timothy stood at the gate, their faces a mixture of fear and reluctant pride. Sarah rode over to them for a final farewell. 3 days, she promised. "Lieutenant Harker said we'll return within 3 days, regardless of outcome." Ellen squeezed her daughter's hand. "Your father would say you're either the bravest or the most foolish miller yet." Her voice softened. "Perhaps both." Timothy, still sullen from losing the argument to accompany them, nevertheless reached up to adjust Sarah's saddle strap. "If you're not back in 3 days, I'm coming after you," he warned. "Promise or no promise." The small party rode out as the sun cleared the horizon, following the guidance of a scout who had spent years in Comanche territory. They traveled north and west, toward an area where Running Fox's band was believed to be camped. Lieutenant Harker rode alongside Sarah for much of the morning, explaining their strategy. "We're not going directly to their camp. That would be seen as aggressive. Instead, we'll establish ourselves near Buffalo Creek, where they often hunt. If our information is correct, we'll be noticed, and Running Fox or his messengers will make contact. And if your information is wrong?" Sarah asked. Harker's expression remained impassive. "Then we return to the fort, and no harm done." Sarah suspected it wouldn't be that simple, but she kept her doubts to herself. By midday, they had reached Buffalo Creek, a modest waterway lined with cottonwoods and wild plum trees. The soldiers established a small camp, conspicuous enough to be noticed but positioned defensively at the edge of a rocky outcropping. "Now we wait," Harker said, posting sentries and organizing the camp. The waiting proved harder than the riding. Sarah found herself constantly scanning the horizon, jumping at every unusual sound. The soldiers maintained a professional calm that she envied, cleaning weapons and speaking in low voices about homes and sweethearts far away. As evening approached with no sign of Comanche presence, Sarah began to wonder if the mission would prove fruitless. She was helping prepare a simple meal when one of the sentries signaled an alert. "Rider approaching from the north," he reported. "Single, moving slow." Harker ordered everyone to positions that appeared relaxed but provided quick access to weapons if needed. Sarah moved to the edge of the camp, straining to see the approaching figure. Her heart quickened as she recognized the rider, Running Fox, mounted on a paint horse, approaching alone across the open plain. He rode with the same dignity she remembered, back straight, head held high. "It's him," she confirmed to Harker. The lieutenant nodded. "Remember, let me speak first. We need to establish that this is a peaceful meeting." Running Fox stopped his horse about 50 yards from the camp and raised his hand in greeting. Harker returned the gesture, then spoke clearly. "We come to talk. No weapons raised. Will you join our fire?" For a long moment, Running Fox remained motionless, assessing the situation. His gaze found Sarah, and something like surprise flickered across his features. Finally, he nudged his horse forward, approaching slowly until he reached the edge of the camp. "Lieutenant Harker of Fort Richardson," the officer introduced himself. "We come seeking words of peace." Running Fox dismounted gracefully. "Words of peace come with many soldiers?" he asked, his English accented but clear. "Protection only," Harker assured him. "For the journey." Running Fox's attention shifted fully to Sarah. "The woman from the homestead. You escaped the raiders." "Thanks to your warning," Sarah replied. "My family is safe at Fort Richardson." A hint of satisfaction crossed his face. "This is good." Lieutenant Harker invited Running Fox to sit, offering him coffee from their supplies. The Comanche warrior accepted, his movements revealing familiarity with settler customs. "We know you lived among white settlers," Harker said carefully. "And that you warned this family of Black Horse's attack." Running Fox's expression remained neutral. "Black Horse follows the old ways. Believes all white settlers must be driven away." He sipped the coffee. "My people have seen much blood. Too much, on both sides." "Colonel Mackenzie believes peace is possible," Harker continued, "if reasonable men can speak together. Some among my people would listen," Running Fox acknowledged. "Others follow Black Horse." The conversation continued as darkness fell, with Harker outlining potential terms for peace talks, neutral ground, assurances of safety, the possibility of reserved lands for the Comanche. Running Fox listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed a sharp intelligence. Sarah observed the exchange with growing hope, impressed by the warrior's thoughtfulness. When Harker stepped away briefly to consult with his sergeant, Running Fox turned to her. "Why did you come?" he asked directly. "Dangerous journey for a woman alone." "I'm not alone," she pointed out, gesturing to the soldiers. Then, more seriously, "I came because you risked yourself to warn us. I thought, if you were willing to take that risk for peace, I should be willing to do the same." Running Fox studied her face in the firelight. "Brave woman," he said finally, repeating his assessment from their first meeting. "Like Comanche woman." Sarah smiled slightly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Their conversation was interrupted by a distant sound, horses approaching rapidly. From the west, the soldiers jumped to alertness, hands moving to weapons. Running Fox was on his feet instantly. "Black Horse," he said grimly, "must have tracked me." Harker ordered his men to defensive positions as Running Fox moved to Sarah's side. "You must go, now, back to fort." "We can't outrun them," Harker countered. "Better to stand together." The approaching riders came into view, at least 15 warriors, weapons ready, led by a massive figure adorned with black paint across his chest. "Black Horse comes for me, not you," Running Fox explained rapidly. "I betrayed tribe by warning." "Settlers." Before anyone could respond, the warriors charged, whooping war cries that chilled Sarah's blood. The soldiers returned fire, creating a defensive perimeter around the camp. In the chaos that followed, Sarah found herself separated from the main group, driven toward the creek by the attack. As she sought cover behind a fallen tree, she saw Running Fox engaged in direct combat with Black Horse. Himself, a brutal struggle between two powerful warriors. Running Fox fought with desperate skill, but Black Horse's superior size gave him advantage. Sarah watched in horror as the larger warrior knocked Running Fox to the ground, raising his war club for a killing blow. Without thinking, Sarah raised her rifle and fired. The shot went wide, but it distracted Black Horse long enough for Running Fox to roll away from the strike. Black Horse turned toward Sarah with murderous rage, notching an arrow and taking aim at her exposed position. She scrambled for cover, but knew she wouldn't reach it in time. The arrow flew, but instead of striking Sarah, it embedded itself in Running Fox's shoulder as he threw himself into its path. Despite his wound, Running Fox launched himself at Black Horse, driving his knife upward in a desperate strike. The two warriors fell together, locked in a final struggle that ended with terrible stillness. In the sudden quiet that followed, Sarah realized the shooting had stopped. Lieutenant Harker was shouting orders, and the remaining Comanche warriors were retreating, several glancing back at the fallen form of their leader. Sarah rushed to where Running Fox lay beside Black Horse's body. Blood soaked his shoulder where the arrow had struck, but his eyes were open, watching her approach. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him. "Arrow meant for you," he replied, grimacing with pain. "And I came back for you," she said, tearing strips from her petticoat to bind his wound. "We're even now." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as Lieutenant Harker joined them, assessing the situation with a soldier's pragmatism. "Black Horse is dead," he confirmed. "His warriors have withdrawn." "Not finished," Running Fox warned, struggling to sit up with Sarah's help. "Others will follow him." "Unless someone leads them differently," Harker suggested. Looking meaningfully at Running Fox, the wounded warrior shook his head. "Cannot return to tribe now. Killed Black Horse. Saved white woman. Then come to Fort Richardson," Sarah suggested. Impulsively, help Colonel Mackenzie arrange the peace talks. Be the bridge between our peoples. Running Fox looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, surprise, consideration, and something deeper. "Perhaps," he said finally. "For now." As the soldiers prepared a makeshift stretcher for Running Fox, Sarah realized that her life had irrevocably changed. The homestead was gone, but something new had begun, a possibility of understanding across the divide that had claimed so many lives. 3 days later, as promised, Sarah returned to Fort Richardson with Lieutenant Harker's party and with Running Fox, whose wound was healing under the care of the fort's doctor. Colonel Mackenzie welcomed the Comanche warrior with cautious optimism, recognizing the potential his presence offered for genuine peace negotiations. Ellen and Timothy accepted Sarah's return with tearful relief, and while they regarded Running Fox with understandable wariness, they acknowledged the debt they owed him. "What happens now?" Timothy asked as they stood together on the fort's ramparts, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant orange. "We rebuild," Sarah said simply. "All of us together." She glanced at Running Fox, who stood slightly apart, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where two worlds continued their uneasy coexistence. The path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, Sarah believed it might be possible, one brave step at a time.